Um, I'm Ed Horrich. I am chief executive of Jewish Non-Polluters Network, and we've just had an amazing couple of days as a retreat here at the BNJC with our cohort of we've been running an empowering leadership program for the last several months, and we're midway, and that's why we've come to meet in person because the whole thing has been on Zoom. So we've got a number of people from that cohort in the leadership program, plus a number of other special guests here this evening. We have to my left, we have Tom Godwin, who is leading a new community organization in Plymouth. We have Howard Duckworth from York, who is the warden of the liberal Jewish community in York, which has a history going back to medieval times. We have Danny Louise, further down the road in Hastings, who is steering the very new community there and all their challenges. We have Ayana, who is from the Jewish Agency, talking responsible for aliyah. We have Daniel Shane, who is the chair of WIZO, and looking at the view of all their amazing projects that they're doing for resilience in Israel. And we have Rebecca Graber, who is also on our Empowering Leadership program, but she is also a specialist in resilience and academic at the universities nearby here. So we're going to be looking at a number of perspectives on Jewish roots of getting here, setting down Jewish roots where we land in different places in the UK, and then looking at the whole idea of, is there a route that we have to look to next? But then there's another route which is growing more roots to be resilient, either here or somewhere else. So there's a number of different aspects to roots and roots. And we're going to be exploring this in a number of different events across the country, usually in person in meetings like this, but looking at the different challenges that different communities are bringing to this whole idea of roots and voice. So again, welcome. Thank you very much. We're going to start with hearing about the communities. But first, we're going to hear from Daniel Shea of WIZO, who's going to give us about a 10-15 minute presentation about the resilience work that WIZO is doing, which I think is very underplayed. People in this country, people associate WIZO with a lot of fundraising, but what are they fundraising for? And this year, if you're not involved in fundraising, you probably don't know. And it really goes to the root, pardon the pun, of Jewish resilience, completely resilience across the community in Israel, and how that reinforces Jewish resilience. So I'm going to hand over. We should be seeing the presentation on the Zoom, so you get to see that and hopefully hear Danielle talk about it. So over to Danielle.
Thank you. Which way should I be? Which way should I face? Is it all capturing in the moment or?
The camera is over there,
What?
And that shadow will run the PowerPoint for you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for asking me to be here today. I was actually here just last year. Actually, I stayed here for the weekend. It's a delightful place, and it's lovely to be back here. So it's really lovely to be now working here and talking to you tonight. As chair of WIZO UK, it's a pleasure to be able to share with you some of the important work that stands doing in Israel at the moment. Mainly because the size of the organization, that's right, is a great. So the size of the organization is it is very, very big. It's probably bigger than you would imagine it to be. Nearly 6,000 employees, 2,500 volunteers, country size of Israel. this is a reach like no other organization. So what we try and do is, when you can see here, you can see 70,000 people actually being touched by WIZO every day, which is an extraordinary number. And the reason for that is that we're actually totally ingrained in society. And that is from my small daycare centres, of which you can see we have 165, all the way to our elderly care um, uh, centre, which is absolutely fantastic. There's about 110 residents there at the moment, many of them homeless buyers. And so you can see just from this how much our reach actually gets to everybody. Very importantly, we have 38 WIZO branches, and these are community centres that allow us to deliver some of the amazing programs, a couple of which I'm going to speak about. That actually volunteers often work in with the directors of those community centres, and that allows us to really embed ourselves within the grassroots, like, to be able to actually reach the people we. So one of the areas that we work very heavily in is youth for them, these villages, and they're basically high schoolers. But these high schools reach much further than just the education of the curriculum. What we try and do is we give them an awful lot of support. About 25% of the children who go to our these villages are from disadvantaged families, and that means that we aim to close the gap between those who are able to are from reasonable backgrounds and those who have not. Which you need to offer counseling therapy, but also additional educational work that it's may reach to agricultural environment, which they do amazing, like in lot in Africa, a lot in Rwanda, reading printing. They offer so much additional resources for them to actually look beyond the curriculum. Because often a lot of these children don't achieve as well in the education sector, but from actually achieve on their brands in different ways. And the other thing is doing undertaking harem, which was a flagship um, uh, project that we had in Jerusalem that was first set up by BNJC. They're a vocational centre for now. And there we have a catering course, we have hairdressing, and we have sound museum. And that allows a far more creative route to actually being able to use those skills. And fundamentally, and this is where the start of resilience comes in, many of the children who go here really have fallen out of education. And what this does is it allows them to move back. It gives them a part to play in society, and it allows them to build the confidence and develop their way into contributing to society, which is next. So on the next slide, we might talk about people who have been marginalized. These are our girls at risk. Girls at risk, unfortunately, when we talk about Israel, we want to be talking about a fabulous place that's always amazing, flowers and roses, but very sadly, it's not all like that. Very sad there. And WIZO picks up those pieces and tries to actually work with them and even build up areas of science that haven't quite reached their potential. And the girls of this centre is one of these areas. And I've been lucky enough to visit the girls here. They are amazing. The key part is their lack of confidence, their fear. They're worried that they're going to borrow scans, drugs, alcohol, and the social workers allow us to pick them up and actually do something with them. And again, we talk about therapy, but also we give them different skills. They have to do maths and English, RS and curriculum, but equally, they also get to do Krav Maga. They might do other areas, which again help develop. And the aim is to get them back into mentoring, but that's the key. Otherwise, they'll stay until they finish. But the reality is that some of them are too worried to even speak. They wouldn't listen to speak. The two that did speak to doing it on just unnoticed them. And I will say that all the programs I'm talking about are run by the most normally not access and programs. Their commitments, their ability to be on hand when they want to be, when the girls need, they are, and there's the real confidence that and the nurse that we actually work with on every house. So next one I'm going to talk about is a couple of areas of programs that we label. One of which is, unfortunately, as a result of domestic violence. I'm sure you may know, domestic violence is unfortunately something that does happen in Israel, but since the term 7 has increased. It's an unfortunate statistic, but it has increased through financial challenges, PTSD, the impact on family breakdown from what's been going on for such a long time, and that's what it's going on. It's a very difficult environment to be in. And what we do is we pick up many individuals escape their abuser and their families. And what we do is this is the perfect example of resilience but war, is that we give them not only a safe haven. What we do is we give them the skills and ability to learn and start on their own to use. It might be from neglect, support, and we'd have hotlines for them. And have guidance to people. Often the youngest program will give them some childcare so that I'm quite going to have to build and develop their skills, help them to learn different things. So from that point of view, it gives them a very great ability to stand on their own two feet. And the key thing here is that normally in any program, unfortunately, about 60% of the women will go back to their abuser. Of this program, it has an over 90% success rate. So it really, really does pick them all the ability skills actually. And then the other program I'm talking a little bit about prevention. Prevention with children is all about breaking the cycle of violence and allowing children to talk about what it is that might cause it, whether it's technology, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, corrosive. This allows them to understand what it is they're looking for before they even get to help them realize how their behaviors are, what behaviors they're observing and experiencing, and then this is down to both men and the women. And then finally, we talked about, obviously, our main focus is on women families, but we have some other nominal programs for men, which I think is really important because, again, it goes to prevention and recognizing you can't do one side and not that. One of them is the men's hotline, which really is a huge intervention where men recognize that they are intentionally going to run into abuse. And this is a hotline that is a cry for help. And this allows us to direct them to the right places there to be, again, prevent any issues. And the other thing that I thought I'd highlight was the men new fathers local. Because many of these reservists have been away for many months and have arrived back into the family home to find another human being. And this is a huge problem, both for relationships and for bonds on. So this way it helps them to feel put together.
Speak a bit louder.
You can go louder and like a lot easier for them to hear on the side.
Sorry.
No worries.
I'll just very briefly on this one. I just wanted to make you all realize that as well as our programs and projects, and again, to help develop the resilience of the countries, to develop the quality and the laws that allow women, particularly, to grow in society and be recognized as equal members of society. And we've introduced many different legislative parts and really give a voice to those who don't have it. So I just wanted to make you realize many people don't do that. And finally, WIZO's impact for the wars. I wanted to show you this because this is where we really did out on our own. This our reach in Southern Quarter. Everything got shut down 3 years. And the most important part is if we can get childcare back up and running again, it means that people can go to work. And the most important areas that we need to people working was in hospital, sadly. So we were able to open 10-day residences within our hospitals in order to get people into work as soon as possible, which is most important. But we managed to maintain our hotlines. Obviously, our schools had kids that moved at home, and we had obviously our elderly care home. And the resilience actually was on my slide anyway. But the staff, we forget that the staff have to work with people who need support, and they had to go to work through the war, and therefore to support them and to help them extremely important. And I just put here a little bit of resilience. It's a day necessity because that's what it's all about. It's about helping and supporting in order to strengthen Israeli society. And then I'm just going to, you can see this one. The final one I just wanted to say was WIZO UK. WIZO UK is here fundamentals to fundraise. It's here to help support all the work that happens over there. You can see these an example of some of the events we've had this year so far and lots are coming up. And clearly, whether it's donations, whether it's investment, whether it's development briefs, our group's been an amazing support network. We're here to actually try and develop and grow our networks in order to deliver what we like to see. So that gives you a very important version of what we do.
Thanks, Danielle.
What?
Now then, I hope we're going to flip screens onto our cameras so you can now see the whole medal, because I think you were looking at the
Just a moment.
looking at the slide share. So we're just going to get a little technical assistance on that for a second. If you bear with us. We'll get coming on. Excellent. So we have on my left, we have Tom, followed by Howard, followed by Danny, followed by, I can't do this. Iana. Oh, followed by Danielle, followed by Rebecca. So the roots why our new communities settle, Jewish communities settle where they have settled. How sustainable are those roots? Are they becoming more sustainable, more resilient because of what's happened recently, or because of their legacy, perhaps from the Middle Ages? Or is it a time when we're really thinking, what is the next route that we are going to take? I know that's a topic which goes around many Shabbos tables, many Kiddushim on Shabbos morning. What do we do? Is it practical to do it? Or really, is it practical to come together with other Jews and make community stronger here? So I'm going to invite our three community leaders to very briefly talk about that, maybe about 3 minutes or less, and I'll give you some indications of how long you'd be over speaking for. But if we go to Tom, because you've formed a new organization in Plymouth, where there is an established community. It's one of the oldest synagogues or oldest Ashkenazi synagogues in the country. So why did you build this new organization? What's it supposed to do? And is it helping with the resilience of the Jewish community?
Thank you. It's lovely to be here and thank you for joining us. And I think for inviting us to come and talk about what we're doing at Plymouth. And I think roots and the kind of evolution and the moment that we live in is kind of profoundly behind what we did. Ed's absolutely right. You talk about historical legacy. Plymouth has, as I said, a very, very old Jewish community. It's got a story to tell, both in sort of British history, but British Jewry, which is very empowering and deeply historic. But when you look at the rurality of Devon and Cornwall, and you look at the fact that Plymouth, is a city, the sea on one side and a national park on the other, and you look at kind of the structures that exist for Jewish people in those areas, we face a moment where we have to look at what we do about evolving and about meeting the needs of people where they want to be met. And I think post October the 7th, we were aware there were many more Jewish people than were engaging in some of the structures that do exist in that area. We were aware of that because in COVID, people jumped on a Facebook group. We knew that. We knew that because some of us, unfortunately, had anti-Semitism even before October the 7th in those areas had spoken out. And people had come forward and said, I'm actually Jewish, or my family are Jewish, but I would never tell people that. There isn't those structures that exist. There isn't that kind of language and understanding and that kind of infrastructure. And there was a moment last year where a group of us said that post October the 7th, there are people out there, Jews and non-Jews, that want to do something different. They want to support, they want to be allies, they want to work together, and they want to hold the complexity of what it means in a way that perhaps feels affirming feels kind of vibrant and feels together. That can be as simple as an online Facebook group. It can be a Jewish coffee morning. Those things kind of felt really important to us. And so we looked at creating a CIC. Doesn't seek to do the religious element, seeks to do a cultural, educational. It works with allies. It does work with anti-Semitism. It tries to meet people halfway. And we've set it up with a structure that allows us to go and meet organizations to do some of that work, to put on a menorah event in the city centre, work with civic partners, but also for Jewish Culture Month, do a Klezmer by the Sea concert at the largest theatre. Thanks to Jewish Small Community Network and Ed introduced me to people who found a Klezmer band. We took a real punt. It's a real leap of faith, a Jewish leap of faith to say, we're going to plant this flag in the ground, we're going to put stuff on, and we're going to invite Jews and people who maybe got Jewish heritage, kind of Jewish adjacents, we call them, right? And allies. And we're going to give them the currency and the language to come and sit with us, celebrate, do something different. And in that moment, post October the 7th, say, we've been here, we're British Jews, we're staying here, we want to do things together and with people who care. We can disagree, we can hold the complexity of it, but we're going to do some of that stuff. And we found, by doing that, we found people, and we're continually finding people. The census tells me there's about 190 Jews in Plymouth. Okay? I know we're communicating with nearly double that already. Okay? There are many more of us in our midst. And I think what's been really affirming through the work of Jewish Small Community Network and kind of sitting with some of my colleagues over the last couple of days has been to understand that there is a real drive and a real kind of golden thread coming out at the moment of wanting to really look at how we look after Jewish culture, Jewish people in all of our entirety. Absolutely understand the pressures that kind of synagogues and different kind of religious organizations are facing, but there is absolutely a space for us to hold the joy, do things that bring people together. And fundamentally, that's our theory of change. That's what we seek to do. It's a group of people, volunteers. We've come together, we've got an advisory board, we've got to sit on it. We've got some fabulous partners and people who have been introduced to us. And we found that as a vehicle, so far, early days, we've found more Jews than we ever knew we had before. And you know what? One extra person who feels connected surely has got to be worth it.
So, Tom, does that bringing together more Jews, thinking about the time that we're currently living in, does that now build resilience to work with and reinforce, keep safe our Jewish community in Plymouth or the surrounding areas? Or what does it do?
Well, great question. So it can do a couple of things. It can allow people to come together and know that they're each other. And I think that's part of people feeling connected, especially in rural communities where people are used to, there are some communities where I live where the bus leaves on one day but doesn't come back. Okay. So, we're getting the people in those areas. But it does absolutely allow us to go and tell organizations, local police, CPS, that there are more of us, there are more issues than they know, that they need to do things like go on anti-Semitism training, that we need to work with the CST. Our local police force didn't even have an information sharing agreement with the CST until we got involved. Okay. So we're working from a different baseline. But the more you can be connected to the issues that people are facing, and the more you can advocate for them, get local media to talk about the fact that Jews exist and plant our flag in the ground that we're here to stay and that we deserve to be treated and heard and respected in the same way as all other minorities, has led to us finding more people coming out going, well, now you're doing that. Can I share this has happened? Or could you come and work with my employer because they'd like to do some of their HR team? We've managed to get into our local NHS trust to have a meeting about working with their EDI intern. Now that feels, when you come up this part of the world, incredibly modern and progressive, whether it ever gets anywhere. But that's because we showed them that there were more Jews than they knew in their workforce. We did that by doing cultural events where people came forward. We said, where do you work? Do you know what I mean? We don't have some of the constructs you have here, but everyone knows each other in a community. But actually, when people get together, like we all do, there's a fabulous connection and a wonderful, rich tapestry of history that binds us together.
They're taking that risk.
There's a request from Zoom for people to speak louder.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we'll give it a go. We will challenge our Molly P. There. Okay. So let's just about. Oh, there we go. That might improve things quite a bit. Because I know from being on zoos where there's air conditioning going, that is a bit challenging. Okay, so we will shout at the tops of our voices. Tom, this standing up loud, standing up proud as a Jew in a challenging time, you're saying it builds allyship, it builds understanding in those statutory bodies around you that need to know that you're Jewish so that they can do something for you. And it's worth that risk of being challenged by those people who might want to think about you in a more binary way, a yes or a no, and that might mean cancelling. Has anybody cancelled you?
So it's a great question. I think the don't complain, don't explain model, perhaps that was prevalent in our area around being Jewish, had I'm struck by when I speak to people around how they're feeling safe in community and what they say. Younger people, people who come into the city, students and kind of young professionals are feeling those issues and a real worry about being cancelled, and if people know they're Jewish. Older, more assimilated, or settled people of the community
Integrate.
have kind of decided that they're okay. But 6 years ago, when my mother had to move out of her home in Devon into a safe flat because of anti-Semitism before October the 7th, when police told me that by talking out about that issue would make me less safe, we went the other way and it made us more safe. Because once you start talking about that issue, people realized that it was going on. And actually, in that response, we could ask people to be better. We found a whole group of Jewish people came out and said, oh, someone's talking about the issues we face with. I didn't think anyone cared down here. And there's something about standing up at the moment and having a reaction. It's not for everyone. And I'm not saying I represent everybody, and that's not what we're about. But there are people who want to know there is something happening, and there are organizations who want to do the right thing, but they don't have the language and the currency to do that. So by offering them a chance to do a session, understand how they could support you, even knowing that you exist to talk to around complex situations in the workplace, which we've mediated in, which we've advised on, that has to be something we offer. Because if we don't, who will?
Thanks, Tom. Now then, standing up loud, standing up proud, in a place where there's a long Jewish history, and York's Jewish history goes back to the Middle Ages, and those who know that little bit of history will know about the massacre at Griffith's Tower. Howard, you've been involved. You're very close to that history. You are very close to the idea of community. The York community sort of went away after the massacre, not entirely, and you can tell us a little bit about the latest developments, because there's a new national monument in York, but a new community arose 13 odd years ago, and you're part of that. So tell us a bit about it. Why did that arise? Is it finding the sort of things that Tom has found, or is it finding different things?
Ben Rich and Lillian Knowlson, two Jews from south of Watford, realized that they're living in Europe.
Then speak it loud and proud.
They realized that there was no synagogue in York. So they got together, a group of them, and they created York Liberal Jewish Community. And it's now 13 years old. And we've had the first rabbi who were living in the city walls. She now moved out of the city walls, but since 1290. Now, we don't have our own building yet. We will have one day. And we've got this history that goes back, as you say, to the massacre in 1190, to various other things. There was a synagogue in 1892, unfortunately mothballed in 1975. But we've got this nice community that meets. We meet twice a month, and it's very lovely community. Fortunately, we haven't had the major upheaval with the anti-Semitism as well. We have, because the pro-Palestinians obviously march every Saturday. we've not had the few weeks after 7th of October, yes, we had various others, and the CST do keep in regular contact with us, and we are extremely mindful. So if you decide to come to York and you rang up, we will vet you or make sure you are who you say you are. But it's a nice community with a great deal of Jews that were Orthodox, who come over to liberal, various others, and they just come to York because there's nowhere else to go. But it's a nice one that we all get on. We have a number of Jews by choice, and where for many, many years there was a supposed pogrom on York that you were not allowed to go to York. And 4 chief rabbis spent a lot of time proving, including Rabbi Sachs, proving that was absolute rubbish. But outside Clifford's Tower, which has just been renovated in about last 4 or 5 years, and so they put daffodils every year, or the daffodils go, and they are the 6-leaf daffodils, and they are in the shape of the Star of David. And after all the renovation, they got this machine, and I hope nobody on here is from health and safety, because this machine went at a very, very steep angle, could go up a steep angle round the mound. Anyway, it was 1.5 degrees too much. And they just carried on. And the machine put all the daffodils in and everything else. And I was talking to a young lad who worked for English Heritage, 25, 26 years old. And he was all about his grandma. It was always your grandmother who tell, never your mother or your sister, it's your grandma who says, you should be working in York. And that was in this decade. So it gets to a point where you just it's there in the DNA. But it is a lovely, nice community.
To tell us about that Hanukkah celebration in Clifford's Tower. Tell us about this national monument. Why is there a national monument there? And tell us a little bit more, if you can, about the future for York.
When Chabad came, I think it was the year after COVID. So, and they did Hanukkah outside the museum. We were doing the Hanukkah inside the museum, and I was doing it on Zoom. And I was narrating it to the world because of my links with the Ark Synagogue in Northwood. Our Zoom literally goes all over the world. So people have zoomed in. And I was doing what's in there? The gentleman's just turned to 100. David Attenborough. I was doing this broadcast in a David Attenborough voice.
I'll try and think of somebody Jewish. Is David like you enjoy it?
Attenborough voice, which you get a lot of feedback. It was brilliant. And after it, I said, never mind next year in Jerusalem, next year in Clifford's Tower. And after various rows with various people, we ended up there was a big row between the Chabad in Manchester and ourselves, the police and myself. And I made one of my stupid statements that if God is from Yorkshire, and if God is from Yorkshire, and if there will be thick snow on the M62. The day was a lovely day, the day before. The following night, there was thick snow, and the Chabad couldn't come across. It was just the locals, and it was the most magical Hanukkah I've ever attended. A few months later, we got together and did a requiem for the 100. We've never really ever been to a funeral for them. Never had a funeral because they just literally the bodies were taken out. They tried to burn the tower, then threw them into the river. So there's never been a proper funeral. So we did a funeral service in that was magical. But then a year or two later, they started developers who owned Dewberry, which is a car park, and the Sainsbury's site wanted to start to redeveloping it. And totally went against everything. I was then taken into the confidence by a group of gentlemen from ultra-Orthodox from London, and they were putting in application to have this Dewberry listed. So it can be pulled down, but it can't be ever rebuilt on. I had got to the nth degree, and we were all chewing our nails, and it's now a listed site. And so I was told when I was 10, 11, 12, exactly where the 150 were buried. I'm sure the gentleman at that age probably he looked 800 years old, I must have said. And he told me. This is before it had been redeveloped years ago. So I knew this. I got a lot of history of it. So I'm very really into Dewberry. And the side of Dewberry, it's a car park, is a bit like an offcut of a car park, and that is the old skate park track. This is nothing to do with WIZO. I said I want to put a synagogue in that bit. Now, obviously, you're not supposed to build a synagogue on a grid, but the thing's there. So I had a lot of people from Stamford Hill coming up, a lot of people from Manchester coming up. I kept doing tours of Leeds, from everywhere. And I kept doing tours, and I kept telling them that my plan. So I have a dream. And eventually this group came, and I explained to them what I want to do. And one of them said to me, snidely, "What denomination?" So that's easy. First weekend ultra-Orthodox, second weekend Orthodox, third weekend liberal. The first one before we became progressive, still liberal. And the fourth weekend, we're all going to get together. They said, "What's the fourth weekend?" We're all going to get together. And I waited. You could hear the pin drop. I think it's a great idea, said the old one. And it's a genuine belief that we will to get together. It's like, Catholics, Protestants go to Lourdes. People come to York, I'm not saying as a pilgrimage, but they come, 3 weeks ago, they were doing a prayer service inside Clibbert's Tower that I was organising with the people from Stamford Hill and from Gateshead all over. They went out to Dewberry, and again, the same thing. And it's so, for a liberal Jew to have on his telephone, and he can check with me with a great pleasure, 7 ultra-Orthodox rabbis, direct telephone number, 10 Orthodox rabbis telephone, just because of the enthusiasm. They blame me for the enthusiasm. It is enthusiastic about to do with you, and that's what we want. And you then come up there, and you want to join us for that fourth weekend. It's going to come up, maybe only once a quarter, maybe but to get together, because those people who are buried there, they don't really care who it is, but they said respect that we are going to visit it, and eventually it will be pulled down, and we'll grass it, and it will then be permanent. It is the largest medieval graveyard in Europe. The total is actually 8 acres. But what we're going to do is just the compound.
So your medieval roots, and not only roots, but you can just feel the neshama, the spirit of Jewishness, in somewhere going back in a line from Middle Ages right through to today. And if that's not resilience of being, burnt alive and still being part of York, and still having living Jews there, as we were around, Har Sinai. We were all there at Har Sinai. It feels like we were all there at Clifford's Tower Club. So.
When we did the Requiem on Hebrew date of the 16th of March, there was 12, 13 Jews there. all came for one purpose and one purpose only, to say words. I had written the service myself with permission from our student rabbi, and it finished off slightly different. It finished off with something that you do in an exorcism. And what it said was, the spirit to go where it's intended if it wants to. And we did that. We came out and went back the following day to say thank you. And 3 members of the staff of English Heritage said to me, "What did you do last night?" Because Clifford's Tower felt more at peace than ever before. And one of them said it felt slightly warmer. Now, it was a beautiful night. And yeah, I think they were grateful.
Can I just say, sorry, just to say,
Go on.
we come, all of us, are part of a tradition of some fabulously important stories. And when we talk about putting down roots, I think the thing I feel with Howard so strongly is the way you're telling stories that's bringing so many people together from across different, the different spectrum of the Jewish experience, but also in that historical way, telling something new and possible that is reinvigorating your community. If there isn't something really profound about what you're doing and how other people can take that historical hegemonity and retell it to a new Jewish community to reinvigorate it, I don't know what there is. So all power to you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
So from going from the medieval to slightly more recent, Danny and Louise, you are in Hastings. I know because from a family connection that there was, a shul in Hastings, which became defunct towards the end of the 20th century. And maybe there were a few Jews around there. Maybe there were a few new Jewish families around there, because in one of our COVID Zooms on JSCN, somebody came up and said, "I'm going to move to Hastings because I want to create a community." But that wasn't you. But come October the 7th, how many Jewish households came out of the woodwork?
Okay, so I am going to tell our story, and it's quite different from Howard's story and from Tom's story, but actually there's quite a lot of commonalities as well. First of all, there was never a synagogue there. There was a small Jewish community that operated actually similarly to how we do, which is within each other's houses. So there's no infrastructure, no Jewish infrastructure whatsoever in Hastings. Lots of people moved to Hastings because it's actually seemed to be a really nice town. It's smaller than Brighton. People always say, "Oh, Hastings brilliant." It's like Brighton was 30 years before Brighton was ruined. Hastings has been up and coming for about 50 odd years. So lots of people have moved there. I moved there from Brighton for various reasons, but one of them was actually because I thought it seemed like a really sweet, nice, functioning town on the coast with the walking distance to the countryside, very affordable. And lots of other people have moved there for that reason. And it's only, and I think, if you like, I actually look back quite fondly in my days of blissful ignorance, really. It was really only after, well, it was during the Corbyn years that I realised there was this rather nasty underbelly of anti-Semitism there. But it was after October the 7th that people started to ring me up saying, I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but it's actually true. Every single person who rang me up or got in touch said, I feel I've noticed a really sharp rise in anti-Semitism in the town since October the 7th. I feel threatened. I feel oppressed. I feel isolated. I feel like I'm the only Jew in the village. Are there any other Jews around? And by that time, I had met a few others, and we were I had sort of co-opted them to help me fight the political anti-Semitism that was evident that I saw in the council because I was a councillor. So I was able to say, yes, there is. Welcome. And those phone calls, it just grew through word of mouth. To the point where we started off with maybe 10 people and then we became 15 people with, partners and children. And we just had such a good time when we got together. And what we realized very early on was that we needed a safe space. That's how it worked. That the culture of the town is unfortunately very anti-Zionist, which they think is perfectly acceptable. And actually, there was nowhere for proud Jews and Zionists. So we got together to be that safe space, and we got together in person a lot, and we were very loud and very silly and very happy together. And we kept growing. It became 20, lots of people, and 25, lots of people. And we also had, as you do, WhatsApp groups where we just, various mushrooming WhatsApp groups from announcements to general chit chat to then what we called actually Hastings Mossad. Until a few people thought, well, perhaps better not do that. Perhaps we'd better be something a bit less potentially. Yes, in fact, one of our younger members lost his phone on. He was doing some trick with his college, and he left his phone on Amber Beach, and we suddenly got a message into our political group saying, whose phone is this? And we found it on the beach. And it was sort of big crisis, our first big crisis. And so anyway, various things happened as a result, but we changed the name to the less potential issue of Hastings Lionhearts. Anyway, and we made a rule, you have to lock your phone. You cannot have an unlocked phone if you belong to this group. But there came a point where 6 months on, where we thought, okay, we've met each other, we like each other, we're each other's safe space, we are completely different politically in terms of where we sit on the political spectrum. We're different in terms of socio-economic situations, and we are also have different levels of observance and Jewish knowledge. But what we are is really proud Jews and really pro-Israel. Do we want to also be a community? Do we want to build community in Hastings? So from nothing, do we actually want to have lived Jewish lives and enable our children? Because we have an enormous, I think I can drop, we had an enormous amount of children. We had 35 under 18s. And in fact, by the time we actually incorporated as a company limited by guarantee, we had about 35 households, which is quite a lot, and all those children, and actually every single decade represented from babies to our eldest member, who is called Susan and who is now about 83. So that's amazing demographics, actually. And everyone who's joined, it's sort of always joined in crisis and in disappointment, with Hastings, because actually on the surface, Hastings is such a pleasant place. It has so much going for it. And we've all had that sense of well-being in where we live blown away. To the point where actually quite a lot of our members, we can't put photographs on Facebook of some of our members. They don't want to be identified. They don't want their names put out there as a member of Hastings Jewish community. and I have to say I mean, actually, we're now Hastings and District Jewish community because we've grown, and we're now about 45 households. And, you know, we've got a couple who are in, actually, they are possibly now our eldest members, but anyway, Susan beat them. But in Bexhill, and we've recently formalized our application for blah, blah, blah. It's Google Docs. Only 2 people have the passwords. And they wrote to me and said, we're not going to give you our date of birth because then we could be identified. And a few other people said, well, I'm not going to give you my address. I don't want to be identified. You know, and I keep saying, it's Google Docs. It's fine. There's only 2 people with their password. And that is how unsafe too many of our members feel. And I think from none of us are Hastings born and bred. All of us are moved there to Hastings because we really liked the town, you know. So imagine how from going from that choice of living there to now feeling we're not safe here is a huge and terrible journey, actually. So I think as we've developed as a community, and we've actually got our second formal annual general meeting next Sunday, we've had to prioritize what are the most important things to us. We're largely women, not only women, we have some male members, but largely we're women. We're working, have families, you know, we have responsibilities. We're not by nature activists. We actually, you know, what are we fighting for? We're fighting for the right to live our lives Jewishly without let or hindrance or comment even, you know? And that is what is most important to us. We are community first. And we mark, you know, our priorities are that we are Jewish. We mark the festivals. We've had 2 sold out communal Seder nights in actually a cafe owned by one of our members who we can't name because she doesn't want the general public. It's a very successful cafe. She doesn't want the general public to know she's Jewish in case they decide some idiot decides to boycott. Yeah, that's how awful it is there. And you know, we had monthly Friday night communal dinners in each other's houses, so each one is a bit different. We all bring food along. We have just purely social events. We took on the Holocaust Memorial Day, which is a story, but I won't bore everyone with it. But we've now done 2 Holocaust Memorial Days in the main theatre, the White Rock Theatre. The first time we did it, we had the leader of the council and a Green councillor who is a convert to Islam actually walked out and then put critical comments on their Facebook page. And actually, I'd found out months later, had actually put formal complaints about us into the council. And the reason was I stood up on stage with what I would consider really both well evidenced, uncontroversial, very clear, logical 3 minutes of talking, of addressing our young people in the audience, because we always involve schools, and saying, you know, towards the end, I said, please, I beg you, be really careful where you're getting your information from, check your sources. And, you know, amongst other things, I said, we're all used to seeing anti-Semitism that comes with a swastika and violence. We are less familiar with anti-Semitism that comes from parts of the extreme left progressive movement. And that is the point these 2 councillors walked out. And, you know, it is what I can now call a hostile environment. And that is a great shame. But anyway, as a community, we came together in crisis. We're actually doing so well. And we prioritize the Jewishness. I insist that everything we do that isn't purely social has a religious aspect. We have services very occasionally, and in fact, on this weekend, I have now learnt enough. Thank you, Ed, for your programming to lead services myself, which I'd wanted to do for a long time. And we remain unaffiliated. And in fact, I've heard anecdotally both, the chief executives of Reform Progressive consider us one of them, and so does Chabad and Bright consider us one of theirs. So there you go. I think they're I can see it that way. Slightly amusing, but also a good situation to be in. And we are unaffiliated politically. We advocate for ourselves, because every Jewish community has to advocate for themselves, which in our case also means fighting some very overt anti-Semitism. Hastings Council took 2 years to do it. We got it taken off the table the first time. And unfortunately, the second time we couldn't. And Hastings Council has befriended al-Mawasi in Gaza, which we are horrified by. And we did everything. We pulled out all the stops to stop that. The Board of Deputies wrote them a letter. We wrote them, obviously, a letter. The UK Lawyers for Israel wrote them a letter. They still voted for it. It was brought by the Islamic Green Councillor. The debate in full council was shocking, absolutely shocking, and is almost the most anti-Semitic thing I've ever had to watch. And of anti-Semitism, unchallenged by these self-righteous, ignorant people. It was just terrible. Anyway, that is the situation at Hastings. We have limited capacity. We have to prioritize. So we prioritize sustainability, and we challenge the things we cannot allow to go unchallenged.
Then that's what yeah, an amazing story in such a short space of time. I don't mean this evening, but in the time that the community has come together. I congratulate you on the resilience that the community and yourself had shown. And it's fascinating, but fun fact, in terms of being challenged by a challenging environment, and yet coming together and creating resilience in the face of it. Well, speaking of resilience, I want to go now to Rebecca Graeber. Rebecca is an academic working in the area of resilience, and is a published writer as well. So from the point of view of your work, Rebecca, how do you see resilience in terms of what you've just been listening to in the stories we've heard so far? So,
Thanks, Ed. And first of all, thank you so much for all the support that you're giving to the small community. Sorry, I'm gonna speak up. I'm not usually the quiet one in the room.
be loud and proud.
Be loud and proud. I actually want to backtrack a little bit before commenting on the stories.
Sure.
Just to actually ask what do we talk about when we talk about resilience? Because even in this room in the 4 talks, we've got such different perspectives and stories. And I can give you a bit of one interpretation, but even then, whatever you are taking from these stories, please continue to take them. All right. And some of it will sound obvious, but I will repeat it because sometimes this is meaningful to people, is that if you were to bring it all together, resilience is this process of growing through adversity. So it's not something that you have or don't have. You're not born with it or not. You can tell there's some amazing personalities in the room, but even with what you were just born with, it doesn't mean that you were destined to do this or not. It's a process, and it happens over time, never at the pace you want, and never, it's up and down. There's the days where you feel like the lioness and the days where you are struggling. And I will say that myself, it's very much me, right? It's growth, which doesn't mean it's all great and we should be happy for what has happened to us, but it means it's changed us. And it's changed us in a way that actually you can get something meaningful from that. And actually, and this is the part that kind of sucks, frankly, you can only get it when you face adversity. And there's actually really interesting, like a J curve, both when it comes to people and communities. People who've not yet faced adversity tend to do worse when they finally get there than people who've had a kind of taster of a difficult circumstance where they have actually had support through that. And once you've had that, you tend to kind of manage to cope that. And that can happen in so many different ways. Personally growing, finding meaning, but also growing supports and relationships and finding things that work. And I say that because I think sometimes they can feel like I will never get to that, or my community will never get to that. And we have the gift of a really long history of knowing that actually our lineage, our heritage, however we've come to Judaism, and whatever our Jewish practice, that is our heritage, is actually this is a resilient people wherever we are. And being in psychology, it's not a coincidence that a lot of prominent psychologists, Viktor Frankl and many others, were Jews. And so just that kind of thing. And so and that is actually something that you can take no matter what. And just listening to these stories, I felt such a gift of like knowing you guys over the past few months and years. The years, it feels like years. But just listening to your stories, there's not that many hard and fast rules in psychology, and I know there's another psychologist in the room here, so you can pull me up if I'm if I'm wrong. There's not that many hard and fast rules, but one of the things that is sort of universal is social support and just the connections that the people here brought and that you're doing in the work with WIZO, that bringing people together, and it doesn't mean that best buddies with everyone, but finding other people and being the connector and allowing yourself to take connection, which can feel really hard when it's a vulnerable and potentially unsafe situation. It's so important. And I would say if you can do nothing else, that's that. And I'm just like sitting here and listening to everyone's stories. I think I don't know anyone who in the last, especially couple of years, but before that as well, has not felt really alone. And that includes if you take the brave step in saying to your boss, you say to your colleague, I say, that is me as well. You say to your counselor, the therapist, or whatever, I'm struggling with this. We know that, so at least the work that you're doing in Israel, people know that there's trauma. Absolutely. People know that the whole society is shaken up, and you don't have to have an argument about whether people are feeling some level of trauma. Here, you may have to explain to people that what you have experienced is extremely distressing, even before you get to solving the problem. And across the denominations and people in ages and everything, you're finding each other and giving that to each other. And I think it's so important. And it's something that I think only we can do for each other and with each other. And you've done it all in such different ways. And it's been really striking that, there's both something reactive and responsive to the environment, but also creating something new. So being in people's homes and growing and like building something where there really wasn't anything. Finding joy, that point of like klezmer. I mean, we know in Brighton there was an opportunity to have a dance and that dance didn't happen. That's a longer story, but you know what? Like having joy, that's serious business. And it's not something to ignore. The need to find joy and happiness and laughter and our Jewish practices and faith and heritage. they literally at times command us to find the joy and the beauty. Like we have that in our tradition, and I think it's part of our practice. It's not a coincidence that we make art, we make stories, we do all of this because we know, and the science tells us if that matters to you, that it can't just be about traumatic healing or responding to anti-Semitism. Like it has to be building more, and that's part of what it is: building skills, building the faith and hope that there's going to be opportunity, and we do that through diversity. We do that through building a greener repertoire, toolbox, if you like, that kind of work, but of different things. And I was really struck, like Howard, with yours, that you are not just a memorial to what was past, but you're bringing that into your future and releasing some of that story, but bringing in. And I think that is also so key, that you're telling the story, and that way of retelling, telling, and taking ownership of that, but making it a forward story. We are somebody's ancestors as well, and as we are this, and the same. And so that cemetery is not just going to, I'm not morbidly saying that's where you're going to be, but your spirit there is in that, and it's moving forward. And I think that it's really easy to be stuck. It's really easy to be stuck. And again, myself as well, it's really easy to be stuck because it's real. Like that stuff really happened. And but the time still continues. And we also know that very much as Jews and people who support not Jewish people. And the only thing I would say where I heard something that I want to pick up on an untruth, a fact that was not true, is Danny, you said you have no infrastructure in Hastings. And that is not true because you are the infrastructure. You are the infrastructure, and all the small communities and everywhere else, and whether that's in Israel and whether that's here, whether it's a building, whether it's homes, whether it's people, we are the infrastructure. And again, if you like the idea that this is the science, that is the science, is that it's the relationships and the doing, and the idea that you are doing things in the hope that it will change something, and kind of not waiting for people to it follows you. And I will also say, in getting to know you, I know that you're all extremely amazing people in your different ways, and there are difficult situations that you've faced that even just in the last few days we share with each other, that brings it forward. And so, if you were sat there thinking like, would I do that? Like, absolutely. And you probably are that to someone, and your community in place probably is that to someone, whether it's just, your friends or your family or loved one. But it's amazing. And in sometimes through, especially here where there isn't the recognition or the immediate emergency that there can be in places where there's active engagement and combat and such. Like this still matters quite a lot. And you don't have to, it still matters quite a lot. And this is part of who we are. It's part of our legacy and our legacy going forward. Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca Debbie.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned it, whether it's small community here, whether it's small community in Israel, and thinking about the time that we're in, the time that we've just been through. Most of us have grown up in a post-Second World War period where in the 50s and 60s, you felt that everybody was on your side. So that feels, and the word that people have started to use in the last couple of months is we lived in a golden era. Maybe not so much now. My family, going back to my grandparents, lived in a golden era. Certainly on one side. At the time that they left Aleppo in Syria, that was a golden era for Jews. They were in government. They were very populous, and in Iraq as well, they were 40% of the population. There was definitely a large part of the government machine there. But they left. Why did they leave? They left because of economics. The trade routes had changed. The Suez Canal had opened. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing in Manchester, and Syrian Jews had this saying, "Next year in Manchester." And that's where my family, the extended family, over a period of 20 years, went to. And the sensible ones went to live in St. Anne's-on-Sea and commuted by train to the smog in Manchester. So they made a migratory route. And the other side of my family, my grandfather, my father's father, made a migratory route for a different reason, through oppression. Not the oppression, the pogroms that you probably know about, but as a young man, at the age of 14, he would be about to be conscripted into the Russian army. And Jews in the Russian army, the life expectancy wasn't that great. If you survived 25 years, and that's how long conscription was, you got rewarded with citizenship and you got a parcel of land, which happened to be in Finland. And there's a whole story in itself that I've heard from somebody who went to work in Finland and found out about the Jews there. But he was put on a boat by his parents and sailed out and across Europe and across the Atlantic and ended up in Chicago. And then there was a shidduch and he came back to this country. And then they didn't like it and went back to Chicago. But now around Friday night tables, there's a Kiddush table, like I was saying before, we're having those conversations. You know, we know some of the survivors from the Holocaust had a backpack. And some of them survivors still, although the diminishing numbers, still live with a suitcase packed ready to go even today, and have done ever since they left and settled in this country or wherever they settled. Is that a conversation we're having now? Is that a conversation we should be having now? And is it practical? Where are you going to go? Some people say we have less choice now than we had in 1939. But thinking about, should we go to Israel? Can we go to Israel? I'm going to turn to Ayana. And just give us a snapshot of what people could be thinking about.
First of all, I need to say that your stories are amazing, and I was really like impressed and absorbed. I was really inspired, and I have to say that personally, I felt connected to your story because even though I grew up in Israel and I was born in Israel, my grandparents came from Europe, and in a different way. I think your story reminded me their story. They also needed to build their own community there. They built a community. They grew up Jewish in a community Jewish, but they felt the need to build a new community. My grandparents were in Hungary, and they were part of the for the underground resistance. Yeah. And they were like really like the crazy thing during the war. And then in the end, they arrived to Israel, and I think I grew up in Israeli, but it's funny because we are in Israel, but we always know where we came from. We always ask each other, "Where are you from?" Like and everybody that you know from Israel, you have to know their roots. If they came from where in the Europe, where like in the other part of the world. So I think the question of root, even if you are like, it doesn't matter where you are, where you're born in as a Jew, it's already like a question. So I think my my job now, I'm part of the Jewish agency delegation in the UK, and specifically managing all the aliyah engagement in the UK. I think I try to do, like what the organization is going to do is bring Israel and the opportunity to live in Israel to every Jew around the world, not on Jew, but like everyone will have the right to come to Israel, and especially to help to build something that will be with the roots that the people are coming with, I think, and not like to raise those Jews, and help them to integrate, how do you say, integrate, sorry, in Israel, with their culture. So we have, it's like, it can be very practical and also very, I think, like, in the idea of how to help people that are coming from other countries. What do they need that they can be, they can come to Israel and feel that this is their place also. They're not a visitor, they're not like they're not coming for that, being like taking their life to Israel and change themselves. So I think one of the biggest things we are trying to do is to understand what people that want to move to Israel need. And we're trying to help them to understand their needs and to give them all the support before they're moving and after. We have like so many people that are working in Israel and outside of Israel only for that, specifically to help everyone that want to come to Israel, that they feel that they have a faith in Israel. They have their own place that they need, like, they don't need to raise themselves, and they can bring themselves to Israel.
What are the practicalities? So people have responsibilities, and they find it. I mean, just of 1939 in Germany or Austria or wherever it was, people saying, "I can't leave because." I know. I mean, my friends have made aliyah. They've moved to Israel. I've got cousins there, made aliyah. They sort of planted a seed, and they were at that time of life where either their kids had gone to Israel, or that they could plant one foot there, not the whole of them, and they sort of made an easy passage that way. But if you're thinking it's not an easy passage, I'm going to have to go, and I'm going to have to earn a living. I'm going to have to keep contacts with different people, do different things. I got to look after my health. I need to know where I'm going to be buried. All these things that prey on people's minds. What should people be thinking about?
So, as I said, I think there is such a huge support for Real, and I'm jealous of people that are making Aliyah. But I think we help Olim in every step of the way. As most of the world, the progress of Aliyah is going through the Jewish agency. And we have like the like the Aliyah department in every place in the world. Like we are meeting each month a person that wanna make Aliyah, and we help them to understand what do they need, what the life in Israel can look like for them. We try to understand what benefits they can get. There is a lot of benefits for Olim. So in like usually I think for most of the people, it's like it will be easier to live in Israel than maybe to stay in their own place because of all of those benefits that they can get. It really depends, but there is like a lot of things that Olim can get, and I think the process is like is that like you start with like being in contact with, and slowly you understand more and more what the life in Israel will look like, what do you need for your life there, and you get more and more support. Even when you are arriving to Israel in the airport, someone is meeting you. But it's like you every step of the way you have someone with you. We help you to book your flight if you need it. We help you to choose after you choose the health insurance. We are we register you for the health insurance for you. We do so many things. So when you arrive to Israel, you have someone that meet you, and you have a taxi for your first address, and it's not finishing there. You have someone that will help you in your city, to register for everything, for every biography thing that you need. If you have children, someone will help you to understand which school you want to send to. It's like a really, because I think that the Israelis understand that, like, we want to be the home of everyone, every Jewish or connected to Jewish uh in the world. So we want to have them to come to Israel if they choose. Okay, we don't want people to come because we're forcing them. We want them to choose them, not because of someone else forced them. So I think this is the important thing, to choose it for your own choose, to understand it. Like, you need to want that, because it's a big move. Even if you get all the support of the world, you have to be prepared to this big change and want it. I think that want it, not to, we say, like in Hebrew, it's more easy to say, but to choose it and not to run from, like, very voir, if you understand the meaning. Like, so we want to support for help, but still, I think it have to be a decision.
Okay, Danielle, you've shown us some features of some sort of resilience in Israel. What's your view generally about what people could expect going to Israel and seeing resilience? We've talked about resilience of all sorts of different aspects of this country. What's your view?
That's a big question. I think first of all, I will say I'm originally from Leeds, so I came from a big community, and I'm now in Boreham Wood, so a growing and developing community there, and hearing the stories, I think, is extraordinary. And I think your strength in wanting to build something is absolutely amazing. I think it's fantastic to listen to. And what's more amazing is that I'm in, when I left Leeds, and Leeds now, of course, is a smaller community than when I left. And so hearing things being built at the same time as knowing when I go and visit other places that they are diminishing, because a lot of my conversations are about being diminishing communities. It's actually very amazing to hear. From my view of Israel is a complicated place. It is complicated, and I think that there is a realization that the challenges that they have been through as a country since its inception is inbred. I mean, that's what it is. I will say, though, that when it comes to resilience, what I found very interesting is there's an assumption in Israel that because everybody has been through something, particularly if they've been reservists, that there's nothing to talk about because everybody's been through it. And so they don't necessarily get the support because everybody goes, if someone says, I've had this terrible experience, you've had a terrible experience, I've had something in that, it was good. So what I have found is very much this kind of, yes, there's a collective and an understanding, but actually, a lot of it is actually trying to find it because it's all over, and it's trying to help them, because you've got what you call your middle classes, the people who are there, they're just getting on with their lives, and they've suffered this terrible thing, particularly since October summer. Everybody's experienced something. But if you take that experience and then you add all the people who have been challenged within our care on top of what they have all experienced, including the losses, the schools, the youth, and things like that, then what you have then is you've got challenges upon challenges. And I'll just add one more thing. There is an intergenerational challenge here, a really big one, because even if children have not been born yet, their parents who will have children will be translating their challenges and their difficulties and their grief down the generations. And one of the things that we are trying to do a lot to look at is how do we prevent this from, again, we go back to prevention, how do we try and nip as much of that in the bud as we possibly can? Because otherwise it's never end. So I think Israel is an extraordinary country. When you go there, you would never know. We're talking about it as if it's like a breaking point. if you go there, and I'm sure many of you been here lately, it just isn't. No, you know, there are people breaking. There is no doubt about it. Because there's a society. It's as determined as ever. Yeah, it is. It is as strong as it's ever been in its determination to be something. And whilst we are talking about Jewish communities, this is an Israel with very diverse communities. And we work with Druze. We have amazing Druze brothers we work with. We've got scholarships for Arab women working in our daycare centers who've never had the opportunity for an education. So we are working across all pieces, and they are all within the same umbrella of challenge. And so treating everybody as we would want to ourselves, irrespective of background, is super important. So what I will say on a positive note is it's amazing. The people are amazing. There are always going to be difficult people. There are always going to be wrongs. That's life, and that's countries, and that's democracies. But being there and experiencing it and seeing what people are determined to do to help move everybody forward is extraordinary.
Danielle, you taken us to a point of hope and optimism. I can hear it in your voice, and the determination and the hope and the view of the future that we've heard from Tom, Howard, and Danny, and thinking about that too from Rebecca and from Anna. I think that gives us a round, strong picture of where we as Jews are going. Wherever we go, wherever we stay and make it a firm decision to be who we are and to be determined to have that future, I think that brings us to an amazing conclusion for this panel discussion this evening. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for staying with the challenges of the technical stuff online, the sound, and everything like that. This idea of roots and roots is not going to stop here in Brighton. We're going to look to have more panel debates about this in the future. So do look out for that. Thank you for being online. Thank you for coming here in person tonight. And thank you for the panel for telling us some amazing stories about just how resilient Jews are and how determined and looking to the future we are. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. We've come to this half past 8. We've run out of time. And it's still light and sunny outside. An amazing life.
Thank you for wearing signature.
Hello.